Welcome back to my channel. I am Four Corners of the Page and I'm really glad you're here. Now today I want to review The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. Now in the past few weeks since starting this channel, I think I've always had this book in my hand or off to the side at one point. I've been really enjoying reading it. It's been a bit of a slow burn for me and it's been a bit of a, a bit of a melancholy read in some ways because it's halfway through the entire realm of the Elderlings corpus, bibliography, whatever you want to call it. That main series of 15, 16 books. This is the midpoint, at least in terms of books. I don't know by page count. And I've also been approaching it with some trepidation because all I've seen online is that this is sort of a bit of a nadir in the overall, certainly the Fitz stories. But in Realm of the Elderlings as a whole, I've not seen a whole lot of people put this up as one of their favourites. Which is why I'm very happy to report, actually, that this is my favourite book in the Realm of the Elderlings so far. And even more controversially, second place has been Assassin's Quest. So it seems as though my opinions of this series has just flipped from everyone else, which will indicate that I think the Rainwild Chronicles is going to be something really special. But because apparently everyone hates that, but we'll see when we get there. Guys, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review. It won't be too long, I'm expecting, but I think really to discuss what's happening in this book and why I love it so much, I need to get into that detail. So if you haven't read this far, or if you're just cautious about spoilers in general, I would advise turning off here. The way I would articulate The Golden Fool to people is it is the best middle novel I've ever read. Now by that I don't mean it's necessarily the best sequel I've ever read, or even the best second book in a trilogy. But I think it's the book that most successfully embraces what it is to be a second book in a trilogy, right? When you've got a trilogy and you've got that second book, you can either do something really explosive and subvert those expectations and throw everything into disarray halfway through the novel, or you can go down the more what's called the middle book bloat or something like that, and spend more time developing characters, settings, locales, introducing some new characters, but not really giving you that kind of action-packed set pieces that you kind of see in that first and third book. I'd say A Storm of Swords by George R. R. Martin, not necessarily the second book, but does that first part very, very well. And I'd say The Golden Fool would be an example of taking the opposite tack. And that's why I'm saying this book is the best middle book I've ever read, because it really enjoys being a middle book. You will not enjoy this book if you think of what's going on here as artificial or setting things up for the third book or just padding in general. You're not going to enjoy it. And if you're thinking that all these plot lines from the previous 6 or 7 books are suddenly going to come together here, that gets teased, but doesn't really come to fruition. What you're left instead is this gorgeous 600-page work that really just zooms in on the characters we know so far, spends time with them, makes them interact, makes you recognize how far they've come and how they've changed, and how that is tearing some of them apart, and how it is bringing some of them together. Ultimately, this book is just a character study all the way through, and I really love it for that. So let's talk about those characters. The other way I would define The Golden Fool, to people who maybe haven't read it, is it's all about identity and the definition of identity through relationship. Everyone in The Golden Fool is defined by the relationships they have, and also by the relationships they've chosen to give up, whether that's family or characters. So you have, take a really simple example, Dutiful and Civil, two friends in the book. And Dutiful is absolutely different, not a minor character, but certainly maybe not one of the top 2 or 3 characters in the text, I would say. He is completely and utterly defined positively, I would argue positively, I've not read that third book, by the fact that he refuses to let his friend Civil go. I mean, you could actually say it's negative in the sense that maybe there's a boyhood kind of clinging to the friendships he has there, but that makes him who he is. Chade is absolutely defined, 100% all of the way through, by his loyalty to Ketrican as his queen. You could say that, pausing for a minute, forgive me, the Fool is ultimately very much defined by his relationship with Fitz, and kind of acknowledges that himself with the White Prophet Catalyst thing. I often wonder if the whole chosen one trope of the prophet and the catalyst actually needs to be there at all. Why do we need to have that injection there? Because I think that the premise of the book and the series so far would be carried through without it. But yeah, everyone is just defined by each other. And then you have this aspect of that character relationship where you can be utterly, completely loyal to someone and still find yourself manipulating them. And I think you can see this with Fitz and the Fool. With Fool wanting to take this expedition to, oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of it, the Icy North, or the Out Islands, Askeval, I think. And Fitz realizing that he is utterly loyal to the Fool and wants the best for the Fool, and that might lead him to sending him away and making sure he doesn't get on that boat. And again, as I've already said, we're defined by our identities and who we choose to give up. There's a really, really impactful moment about 2/3 through where Fitz, at least for now, gives up Jinnah. He says, I don't really want to see you anymore. We can't work anymore as whatever this is, because that's your identity and my identity are opposites. And then there's Nettle, Fitz's daughter, and he says, I'm going to give her up as well because I can't have that interaction with her. That's going to hurt her, that's going to hurt Burek, that's going to hurt everyone around her. And so by choosing to give people like Nettle up, and it's not just Nettle, there's other people as well, Burek being one of them, that becomes part and parcel of who Fitz is. I think the characters in this book just make that novel, and I don't really get upset that they're conflicting so much. I think that's a natural outpouring of all that's come before. Forgive me. I think another really strong example of this, maybe the most intriguing relationship of the whole novel for me, isn't about the Fool or Dutiful. It's about Chade and Fitz. I think that relationship exemplifies everything I'm saying perfectly. You have these two people who have been together for such a long time, maybe not in the same location, but you know, they're who they are is so intermixed with one another. But now they've gotten to this point where Chade is getting older, and I think there's so much we could say about age and relationship as well. And Fitz is older too, but as Fitz is kind of maturing into his full possibility of his power and potential, at the same time Chade is beginning to wither away, and they're both recognizing that within each other, and they also have this conflicting identity with each other, where one is loyal to Ketrigan and one is loyal to Dutiful, so it's almost like they're almost on parallel paths, but it's just not quite like that. And so what this book is full of is these gorgeous conversations and these really difficult conversations, and there's about 25% of this book that just feel really lonely and sour and sad, and Fitz himself seems very lonely and sour and sad, but that is absolutely necessary for where these characters are in their lives. And again, I could see that maybe some people would see this as a book of Fitz kind of looking through windows and things like that, and just kind of having these repetitive conversations. But it really just didn't feel like that for me. It felt the opposite. It felt the most fruitful, rich book in the series because of that zooming in on character. And I'm going to move on past that because I do have to say some other stuff, but that really is the heart of the book for me. And it pulls it off so successfully that I don't really mind that it's a middle book. But there's other stuff that's going on there too. The themes of fatherhood, I think, are really impactful. The fact that Fitz has 3 children and yet he kind of has none at the same time, where he's losing Hap and he never has Nettle. And Dutiful, kind of a son, kind of not really, and that even textually is left a bit up in the air. Again, we have that issue of identity. I really enjoyed, maybe enjoyed isn't the right word, but that destruction of relationship, and we are getting back into character, aren't we? But the destruction of that relationship temporarily between the Fitz and the Fool, because the Fitz just can't quite seem to understand why. Maybe there's other interpretations of this relationship, but why Fitz can't understand why the Fool would take on so many guises in his mind, with a sense of enjoyment, when all Fitz has to do in his life is put on these identities and suffer for it. And obviously there's the attraction that's going on between the two of them, or maybe it's not mutually exclusive, or it is mutually exclusive, I should say. But I think that question of identity is more potent to what's going on there. It's interesting that Fitz always seems to think he knows himself so well when really he doesn't. I think that's one thing that Robin Hobb really pulls off magnificently, is that first person narration where they seem so sure of themselves, and you also get suckered in briefly to think, oh yeah, they understand themselves, but as the novel unravels, you realize that there's so many pieces that they're missing. And that's another thing, as I ramble on, that this book does really well, is it never feels like the characters are static. It doesn't feel like Fitz is leaving a room and everyone just freezes and waits for the next scene. It feels like things are constantly tickering in motion behind the scenes. So I love that too. I also want to briefly touch upon the magic system, which kind of feels outdated and traditional in a way. Maybe outdated is the wrong word. Classical, where you have, magic that lets you, one form of magic lets you interact with wild beasts and animals, another form of magic that will let you kind of influence or kind of touch minds with others. But I'm really loving this magic system. And I think I've been trying to put my finger on why. And I think one of the reasons I do love this magic system quite so much is because I love the intoxication that comes with the skill. I think it's really marvelously done. And obviously you have that analogy for addiction. These characters, they kind of have to explore this thing and they want it, but it hurts them the more they kind of get into it. It really strikes a chord with me, and I'll be a bit personal here for a minute, is I suffer from health anxiety a bit. I'm always Googling what's wrong with myself. I can't help it. It really is something that I have to be very careful with, because if I decide that something is abnormal, it will fester and I will almost just tongue it because I want to, it's an OCD thing. And I find that the skills are really quite analogous for that. Where there's a line quite near the start of the book where if you dip in so far, you're just going to throw yourself all the way in and cause that destruction. And I think there's that compulsion element to it is something that resonated with me, and I don't know if it does with anyone else. I mean, addiction is probably the more strong link, but there's definitely crossover there. I love this book. This book is so good. There are flaws. I suspect, I haven't looked at any reviews apart from the surface level, just people ranking it and seeing that it was quite low down. It doesn't really have an ending. That doesn't bother me quite so much, the way the book resolves. Because it resolves with characters kind of coming into the fruition of who they are, especially dutiful. Kind of managing this scene before him of the old-blooded and the Farseer and Buckkeep in general. And again, you have that idea of identity and people putting their identities in groups, and there's a lot to say about there if there were time. So I think a big, explosive, violent ending wouldn't really do justice to what this book has been trying to do. So that doesn't bother me so much. The idiot savant trope with Thick. I mean, I've not read the whole series yet, but I'm wondering how that's going to play out. That does seem, maybe, again, I don't want to use the word dated too often, but that wasn't quite as resonant with me as I was hoping it would be, but maybe there's more. And again, I've already said that the Catalyst White Prophet trope seems a bit, what's the word? Extraneous to the plot so far. Now, I could be way wrong, because I have 7 or 8 books to go, but I'm not so far seeing why we need these conversations about Fitz being the catalyst that changes the world. We keep getting told this over and over, and I get that that's what's driving the Fool's character's motivations to some extent, but I just wonder if it's necessary at all. But overall, just scrolling up my notes here to see if there's anything I missed. I've written about 2 pages of A4 notes because I was just getting into this book so much. I adore The Golden Fool. I don't know why you're watching, but if you have got this far and you haven't read the book, please don't be intimidated by people saying it's not quite as good. It is a slow burn, but it's a delicious slow burn, and it's one that you should absolutely look forward to. And I am just so delighted that one of the weaker books in the whole series is one that I have just enjoyed so much. I am looking forward to finishing this trilogy. I think I might go for it in February. I might leave it till March, but I'm really excited to be finishing this trilogy. Robin Hobb, she just continues to amaze me with the quality of her prose, again with the quality of her characters, and with how she can just stay in one place with a couple of people and make it so entrancing and tragic and intoxicating. So until the next review, which I won't disclose what that is yet, but it probably won't be quite as gushing as this. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.